As soon as you start Breath of Fire 2, you know you're in for something. This hyper-detailed, for Super Nintendo I, used to give me nightmares, and I was old enough that I should not be admitting that. First words you see are a Nintendo taboo. Give yourself to God, pray to God, praise God. You must become God's strength. Nintendo of America wasn't messing around with religion in their games anymore. Capcom really knew how to hit the ground running with these RPGs. Even Breath of Fire 1, which sort of turns into a game about nothing, had an incredibly strong opening, with your village burning down, Sarah saving everyone by turning them into stone, then jobbing out to our main villain. Good stuff. Gives you a concrete goal, makes you hate the bad guys, enforces a rags to riches sort of arc. You start at the absolute lowest point, hyper poverty, you don't even have a home anymore. You couldn't do anything to protect your hometown or your sister. So now, go forth, adventure, and get your revenge. 2, not to be outdone, somehow finds a way to bring you even lower. It starts in black and white, you as a child. I always wondered why this intro was in monochrome, and reflecting back on it now, I think it accomplishes 2 things. First, it brings extra attention to this dragon tier over here. It's kind of like a mood ring. Whenever you speak to someone, your character has sort of a sixth sense, which tells you if someone is being truthful or if their intentions are pure. It comes back into the plot towards the end, but it's never really fully explained exactly how it's supposed to work, and I prefer it that way. The dragon tier exists to give you a feeling one way or another about certain characters. It doesn't need to be explained, it just works. Second, when you leave town and go up a screen, when the colors rush in, it emphasizes how important this patch of grass with a dragon skull behind town is. As a player, because of the color change, I certainly remember this spot more. Shit, it invented colors. Kind of a cheap trick, but hey, again, if it works, then it works. Next comes the hook. After returning to your town, your dad and sister are nowhere to be found, and nobody has any idea who you are, as if you stumbled into an alternate dimension where you never existed. You befriend a dog named Bo, or Bosch if you're playing the fan translation, get battered around by a scary-looking monster. Wait, was he the Eye? The one telling you to praise God, remember? They've got the same color scheme, it looks like it could have been him. Intro exposition, then fast forward 10 years when Breath of Fire 2 begins in earnest. I love this intro. It leaves you intrigued, gives you a place that you're looking forward to returning to, establishes the bond between you and your best pal Bo, sets up 2 missing people for you to find while you're adventuring, your father and sister. And what the hell was that scary demon thing, and why didn't he kill you? He easily could have. You want to play through Breath of Fire 2 after that. It sounds so simple when you say it out loud, but so many other RPGs neglect such an easy concept. An intro's job is to make the player actually want to play the rest of your game. How many times have I reviewed a game where the entire hook is an opening cutscene that sets up pretty much just your main goal, and then you're set loose with no other real motivation to keep playing other than it being a video game, and what the hell else are you gonna do? Both Super Nintendo Breath of Fire games share the same basic structure. They're old-styled Odyssey RPGs, I'll call them. While there is a main overall goal, most of your time is spent traveling from town to town, helping townsfolk with their confined problems. A string of isolated adventures which together form the vertebra of our game. What sets 2 apart from not only the original Breath of Fire, but from your average JRPG, well, firstly, its scenarios are top-notch, on the same level as any Dragon Quest game. We'll get into my favorites in a bit, but its connecting tissue is so much stronger than it was in the first game. Christianity was first introduced to Japan in the 1500s by Catholic Portuguese adventurers. They built churches, converted a few local warlords, and gained a small foothold in the religious menagerie of Japan. Under the rule of Oda Nobunaga, you remember that character from A Nindo Way of the Ninja? The idea that these new Christians were becoming a threat grew. A famine in 1637 led to rebellion, and Christians were largely blamed. Foreign missionaries were killed en masse, and native Japanese were forced to renounce their faith. For the next 200 years, due to Japan's isolationist foreign policy, that was it. A fad, something that came and left over a generation or 2. Then came the forced opening of Japan by the United States government in 1853. Using our vastly superior navy, us Americans made Japan open itself up to foreign trade. With it, naturally came the return of Jesus Christ. These events are ingrained within the Japanese collective unconscious. Breath of Fire 2 contains strong, thinly veiled, anti-Christian, anti-foreign messaging. What's with this new God thing? Who are these people? Building churches, telling me to give myself to God, to praise Saint Eva. In Breath of Fire 1, every town had its own dragon temple, where people would go to pray to statues of the dragon god. Statues which have now been lovelessly tossed aside in favor of these giant Catholic churches. Old ways of life being threatened by this new foreign ideal. What I admire about BOF2 is the nuanced approach. While St. Eva's churches are painted as a literal drain on the people's collective life force, you are, or at least you were, the son of a preacher. Towns which have embraced St. Eva fully are more prosperous than ones which have not. They do great charity work, save kids from the bottom of wells, contribute greatly to one's sense of identity. Remember, when you were a lost child, it was the church who took you in without any question. They may have called you a thief, but they gave you a bed, blankets, and a candle. The people of St. Eva are not evil. They're being manipulated. This through line gives Breath of Fire 2 complete thematic cohesion. St. Eva makes individual communities better, while sapping the trees of color, while rotting the planet from within. It's a striking message that, agree or disagree with the sentiment, Breath of Fire 2 is clearly saying that as well-intentioned, as much outwardly charitable work organized religion does, it still contributes to the downfall of society. So anyway, here's my favorite quest line. You're walking through a forest when a giant French frog tells you that his name is Jean and a witch put a spell on him. Classic fairy tale stuff. Defeat the witch to turn the frog back to normal. So you go see the witch. She tells you that he'll revert back if a beautiful girl kisses him. So either Kat or Nina kisses him, turning him back to normal. Only normal for Jean means a smaller frog. Good joke. Then tells you that he is the king of Simafort. Ikaru Hape de Pajan. You know, I was kind of hoping saying that out loud would reveal a pun that I didn't understand, but I still don't get it. In battle, Jean is useless, at least to start. A big, goofy frog man that comes off more annoying than charming. You bring Jean home, and it's a classic case of the imposter political figure. He's not actually a king. Not sure if that's a translation error or intentional. He's a prince, but the king is senile, so the prince is effectively running things anyway. In a typical RPG, this is how it's supposed to go. The kingdom was well and good, prospering under the status quo, when a high-ranking political official, possibly the king, started acting incredibly out of character, resulting in the kingdom either getting tied up in some awful war that everybody hates, or just generally declining. Oftentimes the game will even use the exact same sprite for the imposter and the original. I'm assuming mostly everyone listening has played through Chrono Trigger. Take that for example, because they do it twice. It's your job to expose the imposter, thus fixing all of the kingdom's problems. In Breath of Fire 2, here's Jean, and here's his imposter. Wow. They look nothing alike. Are the people of Simafort really so stupid that they couldn't tell them apart? Well, no. After speaking to NPCs, it's clear what actually happened was Jean was a horrible ruler that didn't take his role seriously. Simafort was going to shit under his leadership. Then one day he went missing, and another completely different frog started claiming that he was Jean. They didn't like Jean, so even though everyone knew it wasn't true, they went along with it anyway. Despite pushing this new Saint Eva thing onto them, this new frog was doing a much better job running the kingdom. Simafort had never been more prosperous. It's such a weird dynamic. We show up, the imposter orders Jean to be thrown in jail and executed. I mean, he's a little annoying, and he sucks at fighting, but we don't want the guy killed. NPCs seem to be split on the matter. Do we just continue turning the other cheek, allowing the imposter to continue running the show? Or do we allow Jean to come back and potentially ruin everything? It gets wacky after that. There's a cook-off, you end up eating cockroaches and barfing on this royal red rug. Then you kill the imposter because you find out about his habit of crucifying dissenting frogs on the roof of the castle. Oh yeah, and because he's a demon sucking the life out of our planet. Then after killing the imposter, after all that, Jean says he'd rather travel with you, then places his sister in charge. It plays with your expectations, it's funny, has a satisfying setup and payoff, and this degree of thought was put into all of Breath of Fire 2's individual quest lines. These isolated vignettes and its connecting tissue, you know, the religion stuff, make this game into something special. Or at least I would love to say that, because there is a massive elephant I have yet to address. Breath of Fire 2's translation is legendarily awful, and it isn't limited to just item names this time, though that's still here too. What the hell did I just get? The holy shit? If I'm being fair, taken by itself, this isn't even the worst localization of a Super Nintendo RPG I've seen. But I will say that this is the best game I have seen ruined by a bad translation. BOF 2 actually has incredible story ideas. They're just being told in English by a Japanese man with rudimentary understanding of the language and an English to Japanese dictionary. Super Ninja Boy or Lagoon both may have inferior translations if I'm talking just about the text, but those games are irredeemable in almost every way. They're awful, so you're not missing out on much. Breath of Fire 2 is like going to see Shakespeare being performed by your local second grade cabaret. Everyone speaks like that Kevin from The Office meme. Why waste time say lot word when few word do trick? We're at a traveling zoo. Let's see what these lovely ladies have to say. I'd rather see Oopa Roopa than a cruel show. ... Oopa Roopa is an adorable animal who lives in the ocean. Okay, that wasn't too bad. How about you? Our queen should be put in the show here. She's so fat, it's hard to believe she's human. It gives me the creeps to think about a human being eaten by an animal. It makes me want to go to the bathroom. It's very unusual for a carnival to come to this country. By the way, can you speak my language? I can't understand what you are saying. The town names are horrible. Hometown, because that's where you live. Farmtown, because they farm there. Township, because it's a town that can fly. They fucked up yes or no prompts in multiple places, such as when you're fusing shamans, or the end when asked if you want to gain the ultimate dragon power. Botched localization or no, Breath of Fire 2 can be laugh-it-loud funny sometimes. Like when you beat this boss and he spits out, "You guys better not laugh at me when I'm dead." Or when you're undercover at the biggest Central St. Eva church. "I'm just like you, a decent human being." Luckily for the world, our world, not the game world, you don't need to play the original. Here's a fan translation I happen to own a physical reproduction cartridge of. I'll vouch for its legitimacy. I've played through this translation before, and it's good stuff. Adds a run button, too. Unfortunately, it kind of goes against the spirit of this show to base my review off an updated fan hack. If you want a representation of the ideal Breath of Fire 2, then play the fan hack. But I'm more about looking at things as they were, as they still are in fact, because I played through this on my Switch, using Nintendo Switch Online. They're still re-releasing the original cut. Like it or not, at least in the Western world, this hatchet job is Breath of Fire 2, inseparable from its identity as a video game. As for the gameplay, it's a standard turn-based JRPG without any real wrinkles. If you found this video, then made it to however many minutes I am into said video, then I don't need to explain. It is pretty good character variety, kind of game where you always want to take everyone with you, even Jean, if only because he can hop around as a giant frog on the world map, which eliminates most random encounters. Sucks you can't take everyone, not just because there are only 4 party slots, but because benched characters do not gain EXP. If you don't use a character, they stay weak. Bo, your boy, your best friend, gets completely shafted because he starts with you. Then when you're both around level 10, you're forced to leave him behind for an entire third of the game. And when he comes back, they didn't scale him up to your level. He's still going to be around level 10 when you're probably pushing your mid-20s. And Breath of Fire games are stingy with level ups. I finished the game at 46, but that's only because I did some extra grinding for a special boss fight. You could beat the game mid to high 30s easy. If you want to use Bo, you really need to go out of your way to power level him. And I never feel like doing it when I replay this game. You can also fuck yourself over if you're not using Sten, because he gets a solo mission a little over halfway through the game, and if he's still near his starting level when you get here, you're fucked. Hope you didn't save, because you're by yourself, you can't leave, and if you're not strong enough to beat this mandatory boss, game over, man. Game over. Luckily, this ain't my first rodeo, so I had him ready. When I was a kid, or 11, or however old I was my first time, I stopped playing right before the final dungeon because they take away your fast travel bird, and you're forced to play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego with Patty the Shadow Thief, and you need to go to all these towns scattered across the planet immediately after losing your ability to fly, and I sure as shit wasn't walking the old-fashioned way. I didn't know about the flying town until years later, and apparently I never realized that both John and Spar both learned warp spells either, because I just quit. Breath of Fire 2's final dungeon is infamous for its brutality. This game already has an unfriendly encounter rate, and it's cranked up to 11 here. I'm talking every couple of steps, powerful, time-consuming enemies. You learn about our main character's past, remember all those questions this game's intro posed. Well, now we're finally getting some answers. Before you fight God himself, you're face to face with that piece of shit demon who almost killed you as a child. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I last met you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. The penultimate final boss. This demon who's basically responsible for all of that horrible shit that happened to you as a child. In a stroke of fucking genius game design, asks if you'd be willing to take him on 1v1. If you say no, you fight him normally. You still get a substantial fight, worthy of being the second to last of the game. But if you say yes, you actually fight him one-on-one. This is your personal demon. It's yours to face and yours alone. I love this. He's not scaled back either. This is the real fight, only you have no party members to help you out. And what do you get for winning? Bragging rights? Nothing else, really. The demon praises your bravery, then tells you about a chest you could have gotten anyway, then blows up. I fucking love this. It's one of my favorite boss battles in all of video gamedom. There's no practical reason to fight him alone, but it just feels so fucking good to defeat this endgame boss, the one with a personal connection to you, the protagonist. To finish him off alone is such a great feeling. Man, Breath of Fire 2 is a good-ass game. I don't think it's as snack foody as the original Breath of Fire. You can't cheese it as easy. You can't effectively disable random encounters like in that one. They changed how your dragon abilities work. Now they're just one-time spells as opposed to being battle-long transformations, meaning that, unlike in the first game, you can't just auto-battle through everything. It requires more effort to get through. Breath of Fire 2 puts up more of a resistance, and I can see more players dropping it if they try it out, but it's worth it. You don't need to play the first one either before this. Sure, you'll understand a bunch of references, but Breath of Fire 2's story and game itself stand completely on their own. Well, anyway, that's all I got. Shout out to the patrons, shout out to William Robert Lee. Super Mario RPG will be the next episode, and I'm changing up how the poll works a little bit, so go check out the most recent post on Patreon for more details. Never trust anyone who needs a haircut. Goodbye.